chances are you're using AI like a fancy Google search. Maybe you've gone a step further and done stuff like upload a contract to ChatGPT and ask it to review it. Definitely useful, but with understanding a few different techniques and tools, you can get a lot more out of AI. So in this video, I'm going to show you an exact step-by-step guide to getting the most out of AI for construction manager. And the golden rule behind this is that you should always see AI as a data transformation tool. You give it the background information it needs to do a task, you specify the transformation process, and you define the exact output format you want. AI models like ChatGPT, Claude, and Google Gemini are trained on all the data on the internet. They don't know anything about you or your project. For example, if I upload a set of drawings and I ask Gemini to please prepare an estimate for my project, I can guarantee it is going to give me a crappy result. It doesn't know what scope I usually price. It doesn't have access to my cost library, my production rates, my typical activity templates. It doesn't know what markup and margin I want it to do. It doesn't know what overheads I want to put on the project or whether I want to cover those with my corporate overheads. There's so much background information and data that should go into this task that it is fundamentally not going to do a good job of it. So seeing AI as a data transformation tool is going to be the underlying principle to which we apply it to every construction management task. Okay, so next, before we jump into any fancy strategies like context engineering or how you structure and design your prompts, the 80-20 of getting the most out of AI for construction tasks is applying it to the right problems. And applying it to the right problems is a function of understanding both the technical limitations of these tools and the behavioral issues we run into as people when we use them. These are the issues you need to keep at the front of your mind when you're ever thinking about applying AI to different tasks. Because again, I can tell you exactly when, where, and how to use AI, but the reality is construction is messy and complex. Every project's different, and so understanding where AI fails and what can go wrong and how we as people run into problems when using it is absolutely essential to thinking through how to apply it. So issue number one is hallucination. And it is true over time, this is becoming less and less of an issue, but basically it is the chance that you ask a model to do something like, say, I don't know, what is the curing time of 32 MPa concrete? And it just gives you an absolutely bogus, nonsensical answer. Or you ask it, what is the rate for liquidated damages in my contract? And it just gives you an answer that is completely wrong. The fix to hallucination is using RAG systems. So using systems like Google NotebookLM, where they retrieve information directly from your documents, and also limiting the amount of context you send the model. As an extension of hallucination and a related problem is context rot. So most of these models like Gemini, ChatGPT, all now have context windows of up to 1 million tokens. What this means in practice is theoretically, in any one AI chat or any request sent to an AI model, you can have like 20 textbooks worth of information. The bit no one tells you is that the more context you send the model, the less accurate its responses be. What this means in practice is if you upload a one-page contract and ask it, what is the liquidated damages clause? It is much more likely to answer correctly than if you upload a 5,000-page contract and you ask it, what is the liquidated damages clause? The greater the context size, the less accurate it answers. So again, less context is better. And this isn't so much about use cases, but thinking through how you pass through context to the model. Now, the next challenge is unconstrained reasoning. So this is partly a context rot issue, but this is also a practical issue. Now, this isn't limited to AI. If you imagine had a new employee come into your office and you just say, without any other context or information, you say, go prepare an estimate. That task of go prepare an estimate, that is actually 20 to 30 to probably 50 subtasks. Each of these individual tasks, there is a percentage chance that the person or the model goes slightly off course. And the increased length that task is, the more steps are on the process, that chance that they stuff up the task compounds. Practically, this is a maths problem. If we think about the accuracy of it performing a specific task. And when we say accuracy, we don't mean the chance it hallucinates. We simply mean the chance it does it in a way we're not happy with. This accuracy compounds over time. So if it does the first step wrong, then it is using the wrong data to feed into the second step. So if we have a 20-step process with a 95% accuracy, the overall percentage that's correct is 95% to the power of 20, which means the overall performance is 36%. If we have a 5-step process, it's 77%. So prompting, correct context, the correct instructions, that can increase this accuracy, but the simplification of the prompt, the number of steps you're asking it to do at once, is also a massive determinant on the overall performance of the model. Now, the next technical limitation to overcome with these models is the fact that they were trained on generic data on the internet. So if I go back to my example of preparing an estimate, if I ask it to calculate the cost of installing cable tray, implied in that task is the model needs to come up with a production rate to install cable tray. The production rate it comes up with is just this recollection it has from its training data, which is predominantly things like Reddit, Wikipedia, YouTube, Google. So you really have to think about, is the level of data on the internet is the same effectively as what you could Google. So again, that's why you have to use these models as data transformation tools, and you always have to be giving them the data they need to do the task. The next one, probably more of a specific limitation, is the model's ability to reason visually and to count things. While we think of counting the number of piles on a drawing or counting the number of light fittings, it's relatively simple. It's actually a very simple task for us. It's actually very complicated for these models. These models, visual reasoning and things like counting, because of the way they operate under the hood, they do not do these things precisely. They're probabilistic models, which is great for things like creativity and problem solving, but for simple tasks like counting makes it very difficult. So again, you should generally avoid these models for things like quantity takeoffs, reading drawings, or tasks that are mathematically based. Now, the next one is, and I do admit Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT now actually have inbuilt memory between sessions, but that is the model determining what memory to store. Fundamentally, every time you start a new chat, it's not like an employee or a coworker who remembers important things they tell you. Basically, these models start from scratch every time. Now, the final limitation that's worth understanding is that by default, these models produce very verbose and over-the-top writing. Again, that's because they're trained on articles, books, resources like that on the internet. For 90% of construction tasks, we want concise, very descriptive outputs. And again, that is why when using these models, you should use them as data transformation tools. And as part of that process, you should clearly specify the output format you want something in. Okay, next we have behavioral limitations. And this really fundamentally comes down to the fact that all these models say whenever you ask them to do something, they always say at the bottom of it, these models are probabilistic, or this one says, for example, Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double check responses. That is fine in theory, but what happens if I ask AI to do a task like preparing an estimate? It prepares me this beautifully polished, organized 300-line construction estimate. It is almost impossible for me to go through this line by line without jumping to conclusions, without making these implicit assumptions that it has done the task correctly. So this is referred to as automation bias, and there are a lot of studies that have actually shown that people given AI do tasks less well than if they didn't have AI, because they rely on AI to do the task. They get this AI output. They're meant to check it and review it and correct what's right, but it is very difficult for people to do this. There is an interesting study where they measured the performance of doctors using AI, and they found that doctors who used AI more actually did not perform as well as doctors who weren't using AI. So it seems like you have this amazing tool that can spit out estimates, do detailed workings, prepare a 500-line spreadsheet. It's got beautiful formatting. It's everything bold. It's got perfect item numbers. Everything looks very good. But at the end of the day, it is very hard to check. It may not have done it the correct way. It might have made some mistakes with linking documents. We might have come up with the incorrect labor rates. Again, it's very hard for people to check these things. And the more people have access to AI, the more they rely on the outputs of it, and the harder it is for them to go back and check the work. So look, this is the key behavioral limitation I see with using AI, and that is AI overuse. Okay, to make this a bit more practical, there's 3 rules you should follow when using AI. So number 1 is to use grounded, concrete tasks rather than abstract tasks. So for example, if I wanted AI to review a contract, I could upload the contract and I could say, review my contract, but then it would have to determine, well, what structure do you want it reviewed in? What format do you want it reviewed in? What are the key clauses? What are reasonable positions to take against these clauses? So a bad way to do this would be to just upload a contract and say review it. A good way to review this would be to explain attached is a construction contract. Please go line by line through this contract and prepare a departure register by comparing the contract clauses against my acceptable terms. So what it's doing here is instead of just this generic review a contract, I have given it the background information it needs to do the task, which is my standard acceptable positions of contract. I've given it the output format, which is an example contract review template. And then I've given it the actual contract itself. So instead of having to come up with all this interim reasoning and determine what it's going to do, what are important clauses, again, very explicit, very direct. It's doing is go through the contract, compare the clauses in the contract to my acceptable standard contract terms. The second rule with using AI as an extension to this is you should only use it for tasks where you can easily verify the output. So for example, while it's running this contract review in the background, I'm going to get it to do another task where I have 3 subcontractor quotes. And all I want it to do is to extract the data from these quotes and to populate a bid comparison table. So the information to do the task is in the quote. I'll upload these 3 to Claude and Excel and I'll say, attached are my subcontractor quotes. Please prepare a bid comparison table. Now, this is a good task because it is very easy to audit whether it's done correctly. Once it's actually gone and populated my bid comparison table, again, which is going to take a few minutes, all I have to do is to quickly look at each quote and I can see the total for the quote should match the total in the bid comparison table. You could think about the other extreme like this, which would be a terrible task to use AI for, is you have a set of 50 construction drawings and you upload your drawings to AI and you say, please prepare a quantity takeoff. The only way practically you could verify that task is to go and do the quantity takeoff yourself. And the third rule, which is another reason why getting AI to do a quantity takeoff is a bad use case of AI, is you should only use AI for tasks where if it stuffs up the task, the blast radius of that is bad. So if we think about the quantity takeoff being the key driver of our cost to do the project, if it miscounts stuff, and again, that's also a bad task because we know AI is bad at reading drawings and visual reasoning. But again, if it stuffs up the quantity takeoff, our estimate is incorrect. That is very bad. On the other hand, we could use it like for something like setting up our project folder and populating our project template. So say at the start of the project, we have a bunch of blank safe work method statements, our blank inspection and test plans, or our template scopes of work. And all we want it to go through is populate the project data, the project background, that sort of key information in there. Again, if it screws it up, even if it completely does it wrong, it just doesn't matter that much. It saved us some administration time. It just isn't it's not a big deal if it screws it up. So always focus on tasks that if it does get it wrong, because that hallucination risk, it is not the end of the world. So if I just quickly jump back to my contract review task, oh, it's still going, but we can see with this bid comparison table, I can open my quote for core power electrical and the total bid amount is 14,200,000. Very easy to audit, very easy to check the output. Okay, so based on these rules, based on our understanding of the technical limitations and the behavioral issues we run into when using AI, in general, I think AI use cases in construction fall into a couple of categories. Number one is the big body of data transformation tasks. I already spoke about thinking of AI as a data transformation tool. You think about a task like populating this bid register. All it is doing is extracting the messy data in the Word documents and putting it in a clean format. This contract review task, even though it is still going, Claude Opus 4.7 for context, it is quite a slow model, but again, all it's doing, it's reading, extracting the terms and conditions for the contract, comparing this to my standard terms and conditions and populating it in the output template. Again, just moving data from one format to another. The second category of tasks are pattern matching by volume. Again, this is something humans genuinely struggle at, but if you think about this contract, it might have 100 important clauses in it. For someone to go through and do that, they'll get bored, they'll get distracted, they'll look at their phone, they'll go off and do something else. It is quite a hard task for someone to do. It is a perfect task for AI because it's just going, it's very computational based. It's just extract this clause, compare this clause, extract this clause, compare this clause. It's a very, very good task for AI. There's 100 different ways you could do this. You could use, another use case I really like is your finished construction estimate, comparing it to the requirements in the bid documents, or all the requirements in the drawings. Again, it's just a big pattern matching exercise. It's very time consuming, very hard for people to do correctly. Another one I really like is, say this is in Mastt, but if you upload a new contract, you simply upload it and AI extracts the pricing schedule and the key line items just to save you copying it in by hand. Now, the other category of tasks I think are really, really good with AI is using AI as an error checking tool. The reason I really like this is because AI is just acting as a second set of eyes to pick up mistakes in the ways we are doing things. So again, blast radius for this is tiny because a second set of eyes going over our work, even if it completely stuffs it up, it doesn't actually change the way we've done things. So again, this is a fantastic way of using AI. Say for example, I have built a schedule for my construction project. I want AI to cross-check this to see if I'm missing any activity. So I can just export this as an Excel sheet, open up a new Gemini chat. Now, I could obviously make this better than this, but I'm being lazy. So I attach my example schedule and I say, attached is my example schedule for a commercial construction project using your understanding of what's involved in delivering project like this. Am I missing any information? Am I missing any tasks /C? Put on thinking because it is a complicated task and it's going to go through and make suggestions about what I have potentially missed from this. Again, I've already built the schedule. I did the work myself. I'm just using AI as a second set of eyes to check my work. And what it has come back and told me, long lead time procurement, good pickup. It can take 3 months to order a switchboard, subcontract shop drawings, no allowance for subcontract shop drawings and procurement, service disconnections and connections. Again, buildings have external connections. These are all good pickups AI has made. And again, an extra layer of defense, which improves the quality of my output, but I'm not falling into any of these behavioral limitations. And awesome, our contract review is done. So looping back to my rules, we've got our detailed contract review, a list of all the key terms, comparing them to our standard terms and conditions, and our rationale for pushing back on these clauses. Again, we've used AI to review a contract, but it's not just a generic instruction with unconstrained reasoning. Very specific about what we want it to do, and we've given it all the background information it needs to do the task. All right, the final category of tasks we've got, I like to think of as the should, do, but don't category. Imagine you had access to 100 project engineers who would work for free. What would you be getting them to do on your project? Think things like meeting minutes. Again, classic example here, but it's just something we know we should be doing, but are way too busy to do. So distributing minutes after meetings, capturing the minutes, again, very good use case. The other one I really like for construction companies is if you set up a connector to something like your Gmail or your email inbox, and you just set up a simple automation that runs once per day that extracts any new emails you've gotten on your project, categorize them, and just checks that you've responded to them and there aren't any open actions. Those are the should do. You know you should do them, but probably don't because you're too busy. They are a good list of tasks to start building out automations or simple workflows that you can get AI to do. Okay, so I went on for ages basically talking about use cases and categories of use cases, but the reason I think it's so important to talk about that and so important to address that is because it's the 80-20 of using AI, simply using AI for the right task. Everything else you do from there is secondary to applying AI to the correct tasks. So now we've gone through that. Now I want to talk a little bit about things like choosing the correct models for the correct tasks, prompt engineering, and context engineering. So as you would be aware, there are 3 main foundational models. Well, 4 if you include Elon Musk ones, but there's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, Google's model, and there's Anthropic's model, which is Claude. Now, these models, they vary a little bit, but they're all pretty much the same. If you want to look at how different models perform, you can just Google large language model benchmarks. But really, for most text-based general tasks, the context windows are similar. Claude tends to be more expensive, but really, they're just not that different. The one difference I would say, and the one difference I've picked up that is relevant to understand, is for any sort of reading construction drawings or visual reasoning, Gemini tends to be the best model. So with the exclusion of things like reading construction drawings where you should use Gemini, whether you use Claude, ChatGPT, or Google Gemini, I just genuinely do not think it matters that much. If you already pay for a Google Pro account, then you will have access to Gemini anyway, so it obviously will be cheaper to you. I absolutely love Claude. I pay for the Claude subscription, and I've been building out all my workflows, templates, and tools within Claude. So Claude is the model I use 90% of the time. Gemini is what I use for day-to-day stuff. Now, the second part of this, and you'll remember when I actually went through and got it to review a schedule, is within the specific model you use, there are different versions of the model you can use. There's generally a fast, a thinking, and a pro version. What you need to understand here is a fast model, so Gemini 3 Fast, or whether you use Claude Haiku, these models basically do a task in one single pass. So for example, this is good if you've got a contract and you want to extract terms. You just upload the contract, it'll extract the terms. There's no intermediate reasoning you want it to do. For a task like this, where I got it to review a schedule, it needed to do some intermediate thinking. So when you use a fast model, there won't be this intermediate thinking, but what it did is it uses more tokens, it's more expensive to run, but it thought through the task I wanted it to do, and we got this extra layer of reasoning. So really, what you need to understand here is simple tasks like extracting data or saying, what is the curing time of 32 MPa concrete? You should use a fast model. If you want it to do longer, more complicated tasks, you should use a thinking model. Now, the next way is how you interact with the models. So when I was using Gemini here, I was uploading a document to a chat and giving it the prompt. All the model saw, all the things it knew about who I am, what I wanted to do, is the entire world of context it got was in this task. Now, this is annoying for most construction tasks, but there's just things like a project background, data, access to information we want it to have. So chats like this is good for random one-off tasks, but if we're working on a project, we should be using something like the Claude Project feature. So what this allows me to do is it has a set of documents I can upload to the project. It has a set of system instructions, and then every chat I create within this project will have access to this set of context. So here what happens is every time I ask it to do a task, it can read my scope of works, it can go look at my drawings, it can look at the estimate I've prepared for the project. So I'm not having to manually copy context into every chat. You can expand on this a lot. You could have a lot more documents in here, but basically what this is doing is creating what is referred to as a RAG system. It is turning this set of documents into some sort of database. And as I ask it to do a task, it is pulling information from that database. Now, if you want to improve the way these systems operate, when you're setting up a new project, I like to do a step where I create what is referred to as a project markdown file, which is a summary of all the documents in my project and some rules for how I want it to work. So you could either do these rules in your system instruction, or you could do it in the markdown file. For example, I want to create an estimate in 5 steps. Here is my 5-step process. You can do that in the markdown file. If you have set workflows that you operate across multiple projects, so say you have 5 different construction projects, but you always do estimating the same way, you always do contracts the same way, then you should create what is referred to as a skill or an AI workflow. So if you go to the left-hand side bar, you go into customizing Claude, you go into skills. I have a library of different Claude skills that I run. So for example, I have a skill for how I do procurement packaging. I have a skill for how I generate a departures register when I review a subcontract. I have a skill that is a document controller and a document control workflow. You can really, the purpose isn't these specific skills I have. The purpose is basically I've turned a task I do time and time again, and I've turned it into a massive workflow that when I say to Claude, go prepare an estimate, this is the 4-step process it goes through. Within there is sub skills that are nested within it. So it's really taking a simple instruction, but instead of me having to explain exactly what I want it to do into some long prompt, nested within there is a skill with tons and tons of examples, tons of very specific workflows it follows. Then the third layer to how you actually do this is to use a tool like Claude Cowork, where you open Claude within a folder on your desktop, and then it can read and write to all of your individual files. So you could open it in your project folder that has Excel documents, Word, PDF, whatever, and it can then read and write to all those files and generate new files. So again, all that's sort of similar to having a project, except a project is static context. Cowork is context that it can access and read and write to. Now, I can go down a whole rabbit hole of talking about how to set up Cowork properly. The important point is just to understand that tools like this exist. In Claude, it is referred to Cowork. Google doesn't have an easily accessible equivalent version, but you can use Google's anti-gravity to do it. And ChatGPT has Codex. Okay, so that is the tool or the way you interact with AI. Next, I want to talk about prompting and context. So prompting is what you instruct the model to do. Back in 2023, prompting was a big deal. Everyone was developing prompt libraries. There was instructions like telling the model to say reasons step by step. The thing is, most of this stuff is not relevant anymore. The models are getting so smart, so capable that they are just doing this stuff automatically. If you're using a reasoning model, you don't have to say reason step by step, or you don't have to say act as a construction estimator. It is implied by the task when you ask it to do an estimate. So prompting strategies aren't as useful anymore. Although there are three that I really like and I personally find really useful. Number one is to always tell the model to ask any clarifying questions when you ask it to do a task. This is a very simple way of telling it not to make assumptions and always asking it to make sure it has the background information it needs to do the task. So telling it when you prompt it, prepare an estimate, ask any clarifications that you need. It's a very good way to do it. Number two is tell the model to be hypercritical. Say I go back to my example of using AI to review my construction schedule. The problem is these models tend to be relatively sycophantic. You could even see the way it said it here. Your project schedule for the commercial construction projects provides a solid baseline. Great job. They always will tell you flattering things. Often what you want it to do is when you're asking it to review something, you should say be very critical or be brutally honest, and it will give you a lot more information. It's just something I've noticed. They tend to always want to flatter you. And then the third part of prompting is, I guess it's whether you call this prompting, it just comes back to this principle that you want to break down the task as much as possible. So if I wanted it to do this in a better way, the first prompt I could have been to simply say, check, are all activities included in the schedule? And the second prompt I sent it could have been like, are all my task durations are correct? So basically you're being more and more specific about what you want it to do. You'll get better results by being more discrete and more specific in your prompts. So we've spoken, prompt is the instructions, the context is the background information. So more and more, the way we get the best results out of AI isn't the prompt or the specific task instructions, it is the context you give the model. And this is a double-edged sword because you got to remember that you need sufficient information to do the task, but you don't want an overwhelming body of information, or because of context, right, we decrease the accuracy of the model. We also want to make context easy and accessible to the model. Because say, for example, it's why, for example, using a project is easier than using a chat because we don't have to copy in all the project documents every time. So really, when you're using these tools to get the most out of them, it's not so much about the prompt, it's more about how we structure and give access to the information to do the task. So obviously there's tools like Projects and Claude Cowork, which make accessing data much more easy. And then there are things like connectors where we connect it to our email inbox or Gmail that again, give it easy access to information. The way I like to think about context engineering is it's how we go from a correct answer to the correct answer. And there's 4 ways we can get this wrong. Number one is we give it too little information to do the task. If I look at this example of preparing a project schedule, I have not given it enough information to do the task properly. It should have my background information, my quantity takeoffs, my production rate library, should have all this information to be able to do the task correctly. The second way we can get it to fail is we can give it too much information, which leads to context right. I could upload to this chat as well, Pride and Prejudice, the script for a Terminator movie. I could upload 500 irrelevant contracts. And obviously all that's going to happen is we overwhelm it with a lot of stuff it doesn't need to know. And we are decreasing the chances it does this specific task well. The next way we can set this up is we can obviously give it the wrong information. Again, obvious, but I could upload the wrong schedule, or I could give it my wrong production rate library, and then it is therefore going to do the task wrong. Then the final way we can get this wrong, which is a bit more nuanced and specific to AI failure cases, is we could have input, and this is sort of similar to giving it too much context, but if you give it important context in the middle of a conversation, there's a lot of research that says AI tends to focus on things at the start and the end. So if you have important information, it should be at the start of your prompt or at the end of your prompt, not in the middle. Okay, so what are some strategies you can use to manage context more effectively? Well, number one is to use connectors. I've connected Claude to my Notion, to my Gmail, to other sources of documents. So when I ask it to do a task, it has access to a broad range of information, and I don't always have to be copying in what it needs. The other way you can do this is using a tool like Cowork and having all that information sitting in a folder, or using Claude Projects. The second way you can improve this is by only giving the model the context it needs to do the task. Now, if you're using a tool like a project where you have a RAG database behind that, you should instruct the model in the prompt or the skill what information specifically it needs to do the task, so it doesn't waste a whole lot of reasoning effort to go and look. And then the next strategy, which is the one I don't think people are really aware of how powerful it is compressing context. So taking all your project documents and turning it into this concise, high-level summary of the project, which makes it much easier for AI to access. It's not going to waste a whole lot of reasoning and tokens and effort going and converting PDF to Word and extracting the information it needs to do. So compressing and curating context using Markdown files for different tasks, again, it's going to improve the way the model uses information a lot more. So I hope that helps. That is just some general strategies for how you can get more out of AI. If you are interested in some specific tools and some cool strategies for construction managers to use AI, then watch this video next.